Let's finish this session with probably the most important part, conditional statements and alternative structures. So far, we have been seeing variables and we have been seeing some code that always works as a sequence. This is what we call sequential programming. So our code is always at least a sequence of instructions that are run, all of them in order. If structures or conditional structures, alternative structures, help us branch the code, change the code in a way so that not all of it is always run, but when something happens, a part of it is run, and when something else happens, another part is run, or when the first thing does not happen. Okay, let's see what I mean. The if structure works like this. We have the word if, and then we have a condition, and if this condition is met, if this condition is evaluated as true, the Boolean value of this condition becomes true, then we have some code that is run. And if it's evaluated as false, we go to the outside of the loop. We ignore this part of the code. So now we are no longer running everything. Okay? So, sorry, let's copy this to the other notebook and let's see how that works. Okay, let's have another code cell and let's run this. So at this moment, I have defined my speed to be 140 and my limit to be 120. So, sorry. Here, what's happening is that I'm defining these two variables and I'm first printing, I'm going at 140. Okay, so I'm writing this, and when I come here, if my speed is bigger than limit, which it is because my speed is 140 and limit is 120, then I come in here and I print this, okay, which is what's happening here. And it's important to note that what's inside of the if structure is indented. Okay, see how everything begins here, but suddenly there is nothing here. I have to move few characters, 4 blank spaces or 1 tab to the right to see where my code is. That means that this is inside of the structure, of the if structure in this case. Okay, so because this was evaluated as true, because 140 is bigger than 120, then I printed this. If on the other hand I only had here 40, then this print would not happen, because when I come here, this is evaluated as false, and then I do not run the code inside of the if. I jump outside of the if according to the indentation. Okay, and we have quite a lot of examples of that here. We have this thing about the indentation, and for example here I have a way to print the bigger value of two variables using one if structure. I define the two variables, and then I define another one that tells me which one to print. I define it initially to be v1, and then I compare v1 and v2. And if v1 is actually the smaller one, then I change this to print to v2. So this always prints, and feel free to run and to play with this code, this always prints the bigger variable. This, however, was a little bit of a difficult way, because I had to use this kind of meta variable to print, which shows me which one will be printed. Instead of that, I can usually use a different type of structure. For example, here we have the if-else structure. So this if-else structure basically works in the way that we want for this particular application. I have one condition for the if, just like I had before, and I have some code that runs if the condition is evaluated as true. But now, in addition to what I had before, I also have a second clause in this conditional structure, and that's called else. So I have a second set of code that run if the condition, the initial condition, is evaluated to false. Okay? If condition, and then in the case of true, I come here, and in the case of false, I come here. And that's very convenient for our particular case where we wanted to do two different things. Sorry, our particular case where we wanted to print the bigger one. So we compare them, and if v1 is bigger, then we print it here, and if it's not, then we print the other one. Okay. Here we have also another example where we print different things regarding the speed limit and the value of the variable. In the cases where we don't want two alternatives like we have with if-else, but we might want many of them, we have something called elif, which is our third type of conditional structure. And it works as an extension of what we have just mentioned. We have a first condition, if condition 1, and then some code, and then we have elif and a second condition, some more code, elif, and a third condition, and this goes on and on and on, and ends with an else. Okay, if none of the previous conditions is met, we can, if we want, add an else, or we can't ignore it. And here we have an example. We define an integer variable with some value, and then we see if it's equal to 1, elif to 2, elif to 3, and so on and so forth until 7, where I basically got bored of writing the same code over and over again, and then we have an else that says, okay, if you didn't enter in any of the ones before, we are not doing anything else. Sorry, I only translate integers from 1 to 7. Okay? To finish, these alternative constructions can be nested. That means that I can have an if inside of another if. In this case, I have one if with elif here on the first level, and on the second level, indicated by the indentation, I have another if-else construction, alternative construction. This will be a theme for all of our code. Very often I will have different type of structures nested within one another. Okay? We can make very compact code, which is always an important thing for many Python programs, by using a couple of tricks. The first trick is the one-liner ifs. If all I'm going to do inside of an if is just one instruction, I can write everything, the if and instruction, in one single line, as we are seeing here. And I can do it with an if and with an else too. Actually, in this case, I can even use something called Python's ternary operator, which basically allows me to assign to one variable the result of one condition. So I have an if here in the middle and an else here, and then I have to one side the value that will be assigned to the variable if this condition is evaluated to true, and on the other side the value that will be assigned to the variable if the condition is assigned as false. This is the what's called Python ternary operator. Okay, and it's equivalent to having an if with the assignment of the variable in if else with the assignment of the variable in both branches, both in the if and in the else. As I said before, two tricks to make our code a little bit shorter, a little bit more compact, but basically the same idea as we have been seeing with alternative operators. Okay, to sum up, we defined what Boolean variables are, and we played a little bit. We made some, we combined them using arithmetic operators to produce Boolean values, and then we linked them using chains. We also used logical operators to combine those Boolean values. We used AND, we used NOT, and we used OR. Finally, we saw how now our code doesn't always need to be just a sequence of instructions. Now we can branch it. We can make it do two different things at one particular point, and that's what we called alternative constructions. We saw if first, which is simpler and only has one possible branch, and then we saw other ways to do more than one possible branch. If else, that's two, and if, elif, else, that's as many as we want. Okay, so this is the end of the second unit.